Chamish back for our next hour. We've got a really good guest, and I think you're going to enjoy him. By the way, he is one of identical twins, so I don't know if it's David Cahn or Jack Cahn. You can never tell, but it is David, right? David?
Hi there.
Oh, gosh, you missed
Thanks for inviting us on the show.
Oh, I gave you such a good intro. Let's finish it off. Look, he's got a book with his brother, and as I said, you can't tell them apart. They're identical. So, as I say, it could be Jack. I'll never know. But his book is When Millennials Rule, a self-portrait of millennial voters. And by the way, this is no schmo. He's really good at getting PR. Without going through the whole thing, they got a full feature in New York Magazine. That's, in New York Cultural Society. That's a pretty good accomplishment. Away you go. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Oh, my pleasure. Now, we have much more to talk about than what we can get through, but I'm going to go through the book. I'm going to try and sell you this. And by the way, I think my listeners may be post-millennial, okay? It may surprise you that way. But here's what you're saying in the book. Now, this is full of contradiction. The book is absolutely... Boy, try and find a line here. Look at this. Millennial voters, and by the way, this is after 10,000 interviews. It's viewed as quite complete. And it's actually, if this is complete, boy, what a crazy generation this is. All right. Millennial voters are the most pro-gun generation in America, but also the most pro-gun reform. And exactly what does that mean?
Yeah, so I think that what we find is that millennials are the most likely generation to oppose bans on guns. So, for example, Democrats like to talk a lot about the federal assault weapons ban as a means of reducing gun violence by getting these military-grade weapons off the street. But when you look at actual polls done by groups like Pew Research and Gallup, they find that millennials are actually the most likely demographic to oppose bans on guns, to oppose the semi-automatic weapons ban, and that 2 in 3 young people is considered owning a gun in the future. So that's why a lot of pundits have concluded, hey, these millennials are the most pro-gun generation in America. And then that's where you get your contradiction, or your seeming contradiction, is that millennials are also the most pro-gun reform generation, in that they're the most likely generation to support regulations on gun ownership and regulation on gun dealers. For example, 92% of them support universal background checks, and 59% say that we need to have reasonable restrictions on guns. So I think the balance there, and kind of one of the core thesis of our book, is that these young people are able to develop nuanced views. They're able to unify at the center of the political spectrum, and we call this radical realism. The idea
I know you do, and we'll get to that. But selling gun. Right now I'm an Israeli. I lived in Israel 32 years, and I came home with an M16 for 13 years of that, regular and Miluim. Miluim. What is Miluim? That's when they called me up for a month a year. All right, leave it at I didn't have it in my mind to take that M16 and shoot anyone. It's a mentality problem. It's not just what you think about. It's who you are.
Right.
No one shoots anyone up in Israel. No one goes with their M16 and shoots up the joint.
Right. So that's why we need to do what we can to try to prevent mentally ill individuals from getting these weapons and from having criminals get access to these weapons. But you're 100% right that there is a cultural element to these shootings. Right. These are obviously crazy individuals doing this.
Yeah, but I live in a very nice town. And in the last month, we had 7 murders. And this is a town of like 16,000 people. There's something going on here that ain't right.
Wow. You got to get to the bottom of that.
All right. And your radical realism is going to?
I mean, I'm not sure it's going to get to the bottom of the 7 murders in your town, but I think the idea is that radical realism is a way of actually getting policy done, because right now we're not, the last time a significant gun regulation was passed was 1994, before a lot of millennials were even born. So I think the idea is we can get something reasonable passed that is able to protect the rights of law-abiding citizens while also trying to reduce gun violence in America.
You seem like such a nice guy. Oh, you're going to be heading into such a headache. Look, next point. The millennials, again, this is your book, and we're going to push it some more soon. You find that millennial voters are the most likely advocates of environmental reform. But they don't want you to shove it down your throats. They want market-oriented policies. What the hell does that mean? Okay, let's sort this one out. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I think there's this balance, right? Millennials, on the one hand, are the most likely to acknowledge that climate change is real and that climate change is a threat to mankind, and that it's man-made. But they're not in favor of these command and control regulations.
Let's say it's only 50% man-made. It doesn't matter. What you're saying is market-oriented policies will fix it?
Sure. So there's this book called I think it's Free Market Environmentalism for the Next Generation. And one of the key concepts that they talk about in that book, and I think one of the key findings that we had as well, is that young people want jobs, right? They want a strong economy, and they recognize that the way we can pass environmental policy is by using free markets, by using working within the constructs of markets, as opposed to these command and control style regulations, which we've seen to be really ineffective in the past. So,
well, when have you seen a market? In other words, the oil and BP, they dumped like a zillion gallons of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. My new state has, let's just say, they've mucked things up, and we don't know how much. But what are you talking about? What do you do to BP? Have they closed them down? What are you talking about here when you're talking about a control-style regulation? They paid a little fine and off they went.
Right, so I think the idea is that instead of banning BP, instead of putting all these regulations on BP and saying you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, which clearly hasn't worked, right, because they did spill all this oil into the Gulf of Mexico, a better approach is to have actual penalties that are directly linked with environmental impacts. So the company has a financial incentive to avoid those, to avoid violating the regulations, not just this legal barrier, not just this red tape.
I'm sure they're breathing a sigh of relief that they only got fined and not shut down. All right. But what you're saying is they're going to be better enforcers of environmentalism if they know they can be fined. They were fined billions of dollars. Okay, that's my point.
I think the idea is finding a balance. So a good example of two big public policy issues that are being discussed a lot in the U.S. are hydraulic fracking, which is a way of getting at shale gas. And
it's a great way to get earthquakes. If you're in Oklahoma, you now have a good chance of getting a good earthquake. Now, what's your policy going to do to make life safer in Oklahoma?
In terms of earthquakes?
In terms of fracking.
Sure. So the point I was trying to get at there was that millennials oppose fracking. By one of the largest margins in this country, right? So I think that's the balance, right? On the one hand, they say fracking's bad, fracking causes earthquakes, fracking pollutes water, therefore they're opposed to fracking. But at the same time, they're able to say, when it comes to the Keystone Pipeline, which is another big issue, they're able to support that because they think that that's going to create jobs. And if you look at the GAO and other groups that have analyzed kind of what that policy will do, they've said that it's not only going to create jobs, but it'll have minimal environmental impact. So I think it's about saying,
You're
how can
saying
we...
that. Oh my! You're not watching what is happening in Alberta this spring. Where these sand dunes are filled with oil went up in flames. It's really risky. It's incredibly dangerous to have this pipeline because whole provinces go up in flames. All right, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that.
I think there's a lot of research that shows that the Keystone, yes, sure, oil and gas, energy is a dangerous industry. You're right that Alberta, they're having a lot of fires up there. I don't think that negates
whole towns
I don't
evacuated. All right. That doesn't negate.
I'm not sure that's an argument to eliminate oil and gas altogether, though. We don't really have that luxury, right? It's not really an option.
I don't know. I'm just saying what you're offering is such a mix-up. Okay? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not being critical, but I'm saying it's too mixed up here. You got to go one way or the next. If this pipeline goes through, that means the oil sands in Alberta keep getting mined. All right? And that means the province keeps getting burnt up. There's nothing is as simple as, well, I'm not going to say that I say you're an idealist, okay?
I think there's an element of realism here too. We can agree to disagree. I think there's an element of realism in that, we're going to have oil and gas in this country, and that has impacts. And if we can build a pipeline that is going to, on net, right, help us more than it hurts us, it has more benefits than costs, then I think there's a realistic approach to saying that's a good thing, we should build that. Which is why the majority of Congress, and the majority of Americans, for that matter, support the Keystone Pipeline.
I don't believe it's going through. I think it was stopped.
Because the president is opposed. The president has vetoed the Keystone Pipeline, as have Democrats.
Right, and you're saying they're wrong.
I'm saying that young people think that. I'm saying that the majority of Americans and the majority of millennial voters think they're wrong. Think that based on the kind of scientific studies that have been done, based on the research, that the benefits outweigh the costs, and that this idea that, there's an environmental harm from building a pipeline ignores, the larger picture maybe of the oil and gas industry in the U.S. generally.
It's a real complicated issue. I get people, believe it or not, from North Dakota actually writing me and saying this was the most godforsaken, ugly place in the world. Now we've got jobs. Don't take that away from us. We don't want to go back to the way it was. It was freezing and ugly. I get letters like that. There are issues here. But my goodness, building the pipeline would end it for Alberta. Did I lose you?
No, I'm still here. I think, I think Alberta has its own issues. I'm not sure they're dependent on the pipeline. I think the fires that we've seen in Alberta are due to, failure to build the infrastructure there properly. I don't think the pipeline is exacerbating that issue. The pipeline is just creating a cheaper way to transport that oil to the U.S.
All right, folks, this is a very interesting book. I'm going to encourage you to get it, okay? Now, I'm going to go to one more issue. By the way, we're forced to take a break shortly, so accept that. It's only 3 minutes. But I'm going to go to one more issue that, my goodness gracious, get ready, folks. All right? Quoting, young people are the most likely voters to say abortion is morally wrong, but also the most likely to identify as pro-choice. Now, I can understand that. You're getting a fix. I don't care what you think morally. I got to get out of the fix. I think that's what you mean, right?
Yeah, I think the idea is that, my moral judgments or your moral judgments shouldn't drive U.S. public policy. And that's why young people say, hey, I wouldn't do this or I don't support this, but it should be publicly available in our communities. I think that's the kind of consensus view.
Actually, this radio station might disagree, but I kind of understand that position. But ultimately, who cares what you believe is morally wrong? If you want abortion available, that's your stand. All right? There is no mix-up here. You are pro-choice.
Right. I agree.
Oh, God. Oh, gosh.
I think there's the generation that believes that individuals should be able to make their own choices. And I think that being pro-choice in kind of on the abortion issue is very consistent with that.
It's understandable, that's for sure. All right, and many of my now this is between us, okay, but I don't mind saying when I agree with somebody, I understand it. They say it's black and white. It's murder, so it can't be right. You know what? If you are in a situation where you're a teenager and you did something stupid, you don't want to raise the stupidity forever. You want to get on. There are issues that have sides to them, okay? And I see where that's coming from. But it's very hard to defend when you're so clashing. You're the most pro-generation, pro-gun generation, but we want to really, really wrap up and put an end to freedom of buying the damn things. You don't see that as an issue? You really think gun control is going to work?
I mean, I think there's an issue of distinguishing gun control in the sense of banning law-abiding citizens from getting guns and then preventing criminals from getting guns. So I think young people say, we don't want gun control, we don't want you to ban specific types of weapons or choose what type of weapons we get. But sure, everyone who buys a gun should have to go through a criminal background check. Sure, people who are mentally ill should not have access to weapons. I think there's a careful balance there, and I think what's great is that young people are not choosing being pro-gun control or anti-gun control, left or right. They're finding a nuanced answer that will hopefully serve them well.
I just want you to know, I was watching TV before the show began. There was a commercial for shooters. I can go for $3.99. I get myself a really good 6-shooter for $400, and they are not pushing this side. Are you mentally stable or not? They're in the free market. They want to dump their guns.
Yeah.
Like cornflakes, all right?
Right.
And the answer to that is?
That there should be limits. They shouldn't be, guns should not be sold like cornflakes, like you say.
Well, as I said, I don't know what a mentally stable person is, but they get guns.
Sure,
unstable, okay? They get their guns. It's on the open market, and there are
right.
results.
So there are a number of states that are passing laws now to prevent individuals who've been in mental care facilities for 72 hours from purchasing guns within a few years after that. So I think they're trying to do their best, because obviously you're right, it's very hard to know, what is a mentally ill person, but I think they're doing their best to try to figure that out.
Now, you're not actually giving a platform. I mean, you're not representing all millennials from your survey, are you? Maybe you are. Maybe the majority or something.
Right. This is obviously not something that every millennial believes. I think the idea behind this book was to figure out, as a generation, kind of what are millennial views, how does this generation differ from other generations, as a majority, where do they fall on the political spectrum? Certainly, we can't generalize to all millennials. There are plenty of millennials who are very conservative and plenty of millennials who are very liberal, and I'm sure almost every one of them would disagree on at least one issue. no one's going to be in the majority on every single issue. But taken as a whole, I think the millennial platform is important, especially as millennials represent, 1/3 of voters in the next election.
This is great. It's like the older generation talking to their son. Really, the son I never had is David Cahn. And, after the break, first of all, I'm going to exchange books with you. I want to read this book. All right, that's the first thing. I've got a book that I got a bunch of books, but I think the one you're going to be astounded made number one in Israel. It had a real big impact. It was called Who Murdered Yitzhak Rabin, and it sure wasn't the story you got. Boy, I did a real good job in that, and I'll send you my book in exchange for your book. What do you say?
Okay, we'll have to do that. That sounds great.
I think Jennifer Cohn will like it as well. I got this. Somebody really admires you. Just so you understand this, he was on the show. His name is Reuven Martin. He lives in Israel, and he follows you. He's a real fan of yours. Just so you know that. That's all. Okay?
That's great.
Well, you get around.
That's awesome.
You get around. Now, in 2 seconds, we're going to have a slight break, and I'm going to go through. You're not going to like what I'm going to have to say about a few more of your issues, because I came from the previous generation, and believe me when I tell you, you've got an election crap. You've got a scam going on, all right? And what you're doing is you're trying to appeal to the voters. And what I'm saying on this show, I don't know if it'll make a difference, is why bother? It's the sham and the scam, stay home. All right? Are you following me?
We'll have to disagree. I follow you, but I think they offer us a much more optimistic future than we have with Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton and the current state of U.S. politics.
You really think so? Folks, you heard. We're talking with a very, very idealistic author. But you know what? I think it might be a real good change from... I've seen too much crap. I really have. And I think it might be good to have young people actually believing. I don't know if it'll do any good, but I think it might be good to know it. Folks, when we come back, we're going to talk about issues as... the economy. I'd like to hear your point of view on the economy. Oh, gosh. Healthcare. I'd like to hear your point of view on healthcare. We'll go through the lot. By the way, let's just start, before we plug ourselves, where are we going to take healthcare, which, by the way, ain't so hot here. It's downright awful.
Yeah, I think on the issue of healthcare, a lot of young people opposed President Obamacare. It was, 45% maybe supported the bill, but now that it's been passed, I think young people are getting behind it. They don't want to repeal it. So I think we recognize the system's broken. We're paying a lot of the costs. We're not going to get a lot of the benefits, but Obamacare right now looks like the best way forward.
Oh, gosh. Folks, that was great. Honest, David, that was really good. It doesn't begin to answer all the various different aspects of it, but it does reveal a very, very uplifting point of view. Okay? David, we're coming back in 3 minutes. I'll plug my books, you'll plug yours, and we'll go on to When Millennials Rule in 3 minutes.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, invest with the security of gold and silver. call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host, Melody Cedarstrom, right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, 1-800-375-4188.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today, so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
Hey folks, this is Barry Chamish. I'm going to plug myself before David plugs himself. First of all my books. There are 9 of them in 1, 2, 3 languages, 4 even. Spanish, French, doesn't matter. All my books are at lulu.com. That's www.lulu.com. And there's a search box right in my last name, Chamish. Chamish. I haven't a clue which one you'll like best in this conversation. I would start with something like Save Israel. I think I was at his belief system when I wrote that book. Now, also, I have a website, and I need help. He is not living up to everything, and I wish he would. But it's still www.barrychamish.com. David, plug the hell out of yourself.
Well, we're just here to talk about, When Millennials Rule,
Right.
a book about how young people are going to change the U.S. political system. The focus of the book is the Millennial Platform, which we reveal after conversations with more than 10,000 young people. So I'm happy to talk about, public policy and any political issues you think are
How do
interesting.
you get the book? How do you get it?
The book that you can buy, you can get the book on Amazon and on our website, whenmillennialsrule.com.
One more time and slowly so everyone hears it.
The book is available on Amazon and on whenmillennialsrule.com. It's going to be published in early August and is now available for pre-order.
Perfect. Now, folks, we're on for 1 week only. We're archived at libertyarchives.com if you missed that. And by the way, I got to give you the best agent credit. I assume you've been getting coverage in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Time, Tablet Salon, and no less than Al Jazeera. That's a pretty good agent.
Yep, our agent, we're very happy with our agent, Jennifer Cohen. She's done a great job for us.
I think she'll be happy when you send me your address. I'm not sure I can ever live up to your very, very New York ties, but I've had a career too. All right. Now, look, here's what you're saying. Oh, I'm going to do one more issue, and then I'm going to make you listen just to one thing. But next, economy, what's your plan? What do you claim the majority of millennials want for the economy?
Definitely think the economy is one of the more complex issues that we hear millennials talk about. I think the key idea we get from them is they want the government to deal with the root causes of their unemployment, which they think are three things. The first is globalization. The second is a slowdown in innovation. And the third is a skills mismatch because college education isn't working and people aren't trained for their jobs. So I think the general idea is, Republicans keep talking about tax cuts and Democrats keep talking about government spending. At the end of the day, neither of them are dealing with the root causes of unemployment.
Actually, I agree with that. Without diving into it, it could be a fascinating chapter. Next, get ready. Foreign policy. What are you offering foreign policy-wise?
The millennial platform on foreign policy is what you might expect. I think this is a generation that is really scared after the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. They see those wars having had been a failure, and as a result, they have Iraq aversion, to use a term coined by the Cato Institute. And I think the result of that is millennials definitely have a much believe that the U.S. needs to play a much smaller presence in the world. They don't want to see the U.S. going out fighting wars in the Middle East. And I think as a result, we're going to see a really much more multipolar world in the next few years with the rise of China, rise of Russia. I think the U.S. is going to kind of lose its role as a global superpower under millennials.
What about all this push that there is something called ISIS? Now, look, David, don't get me wrong. I was there probably when you were probably in junior high, all right, with the founding of ISIS. It's a very, very tricky issue, but it won't go away. It's already been started, and the migrants are already in place. Now, what are you going to do to pull back America from the mess it's in?
You're right. I think ISIS is a really complicated issue, and young people are really scared of ISIS, especially after the San Bernardino attacks and the shootings in Paris. And what we're seeing is this surge in support for intervention against ISIS. Just a few months ago, we had 40% of millennials supporting intervention and 60% opposing it, as compared with the flip statistics for adults. And now we're seeing, a 15% increase in support for intervention against ISIS. So I think the short version is, yes, young people say we caused this problem, we need to fix it. And I think increasingly we're seeing young people kind of warming up to intervention, warming up to doing something about ISIS. Obviously, the tougher question is, what do we do? We're in a situation where the U.S. has very few options.
The tougher question is, what did you do? All right. All right. I got my 2 cents in. Fine. Look, I'm going to add something. Now I butt in. Are you ready for this?
Of course.
just one sentence. You are the this is your quote, of course. You are the generation that grew up through 9/11. Now, I want to tell you a little something about me and my generation. I was invited to speak at the 9/11 conference in New York, the fifth one. It was very simple. Now, please hear me. We know that in the morning a couple planes hit a couple big buildings, down they went. What happened, in your opinion, at 5:20 in the afternoon when Building 7 went straight down, just like an arrow, straight down after the plane that was supposed to pretend it was knocking it down? Well, something happened and it fell in Pennsylvania. It didn't arrive. They were stuck with a building full of chemicals and arms and explosives, and they brought it down saying it, well, what they said was it was structurally unsound. It went straight down. That's what I spoke on the 5th anniversary. No one seemed to realize that. Buildings don't fall straight down unless they're supposed to. David, did you hear me?
Yeah, I honestly haven't done so much research on that. I don't know very much about
Larry Silverstein got a spare
the details. I haven't looked into the details. I assume, I believe that this was, this is clearly, they drove planes into these buildings. I'm not sure I buy. I'm not sure. I think there's too much more complicated than that. But I hear what you're saying.
No. Once again, apparently Larry Silverstein had a meeting with the fire department, and they all agreed that down comes the building, and the insurance company paid Larry Silverstein a spare $3.7 billion for his building. He got 7 point God knows what billion. There is something not good going on. Not good going on. There. I did it.
Okay, we can agree to disagree on that.
What's to disagree? What part don't you like?
I mean, I don't think there's anything sketchy that happened there, but like I said, I'm not an expert on 9/11. I don't think there's anything.
An expert on buildings that fall down in straight lines.
Like I said, not an expert.
You know what? I think we've got a good basis between us. This is obviously, you're a very, very intelligent person, and you're going to think about this. And by the way, I'll bet you Jack is too. All right. Now, folks, they write for Huntington Post, which is pretty hip, They've got a pretty hip outlet there. Now, let's go through one other thing. I'm going to quote you again. You are going to unify America around common sense solutions and take back America's future. That's a pretty grandiose attempt. What is common sense? What are we going to unify around?
Yeah, great question. I think that's a good way to kind of conclude, is on this topic of kind of common sense solutions and unifying around the answers. I think that kind of brings together a lot of the issues we've been talking about, because what we're saying is, instead of staking out a position on the left or the right, instead of being pro-gun, anti-gun, pro-Obamacare, anti-Obamacare, kind of all the issues you're talking about, young people are forming their political opinions kind of at the center of the spectrum, pulling different ideas from Republicans, from Democrats, from independents, and forming their own political opinions. And as a result, they have really large majorities that are supporting specific policies, and the outcome of that is they are unifying around these ideas, and they're going to be able to, once they have a majority in Washington, they're going to be able to implement these policies, finally make progress on a lot of these issues.
And you believe they're going to have a majority? Okay, I'm going to quote you again. All right, get ready. Here's me being a skeptic, all right, but not a nasty skeptic, just a skeptic. What you are saying is, your quote again, this is your book, 4 and 5, okay? 80% of millennials think they'll be better off than their parents. Boy, you didn't grow up in the 50s and 60s when Believe me, it was easier, all right? But what you're saying is they believe they're going to build a better future. Now, don't get me wrong, okay? They're not taking over the government. And whoever is going to be a moron. How are they going to build a better future? The odds are so stacked against them.
I mean, I think we've seen tremendous improvements in terms of poverty and other issues in the U.S. and abroad.
They're getting worse.
Through every generation.
Okay.
We're seeing increases in income inequality, and there are definitely a lot of issues to combat. And I think what young people are saying is they want to turn this around. They want to focus on the root causes of these economic issues. They want to pass good public policy, and they believe that they can do that. And I think, the optimism is pretty tremendous given that the situation they lived through is so difficult. They lived through 9/11. They lived through the Great Recession. But I think that optimism translates into an ability to say, hey, let's compromise instead of disagreeing, and that allows them to pass public policy that's going to ultimately build a more prosperous country.
Life gets tougher. That's all I can tell you. By the way, when I was probably your age, maybe younger, I moved to Israel, joined the army, stood up for my people, all that stuff, and then I found out they're murdering our leaders. There's all kinds of terrible stuff going on. It kind of wrecked my radical realism, which I didn't think was so radical. But things catch up. I want you to know that.
So I think we're going to see that. I think that's an interest. It'll be interesting to see how millennial views evolve as they get older. Certainly, there are generational differences, right, between being in their 20s and early 30s and getting older. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that evolves. I have to run right now, but thanks for having me. I'm glad we got to have this conversation.
Look, send your address. And I'll send you a nice package in the mail. After this interview, just write me your address, and you're going to see we're going to exchange books.
All right, fantastic. Looking forward to it.
And thank you,
folks. Thank you so much.
No, I enjoyed it, and I'll bet you he was confused. Look, folks, in as much as personally I like him a lot, I really did, but what you've got for an election in America, gosh almighty, I would know. Does he really think that there's a difference between what's being set up to vote for? That you have an honest, decent democracy that's going to prevail? Oh, my goodness. For some reason, that simple message is very, very hard to get through. Now, I've got a little time, and I'm going to use it for what I wrote a couple of weeks ago. It's been getting a pretty serious response. And again, my own life, I don't know. Good, bad, in between. There's Cindy, who got herself a beautiful new car. That's making me very happy. Okay? That kind of stuff is in my life. But I have this issue. When I lived in Israel, I didn't leave voluntarily. I sure didn't want to. I got involved in stuff. I didn't even know how it happened. Now, the Rabin murder was such a sloppy job. And any journalist with a brain in their head could see it was a setup. Anyone, you would think. I wrote a book. It went to the top of the Israeli bestsellers. I gave 300 speeches, the vast majority in Hebrew. And people, the polls came out. It was only last year. The vast majority of the religious believe I'm right and the government is lying. And they have to live with that. But after this book got very, very accepted, I got phone calls. Now, one was from Rabbi Uzi Meshulam. He was defending the lost 4,500 Yemenite children. They were lost in the early years of the 50s. taken from their parents, never seen again. And had he built up a case. He phoned me up and he said, we want to know how you did it. How did you get through? Nobody could have got through. How do you do it? He invited me over to his home. He told me, first thing, count the bullet holes. I stopped at 60. And I said, why? You're a simple rabbi. Why would the government send 2,000 troops to shoot up your house? Killed dead, Shlomo Sulin, he was killed dead, 17 years old. I said, why are they trying to shut you up? Why don't they just arrest you and put an end to this? And he sat me down and he did something. He pulled up pictures he had of the kidnappings of the Yemenite children. They were in cages being shipped to America. And he sat me down. He said it took a long time to get the evidence, but now I've got it. He said there were about 4,500 kidnappings. About 500 were actually adopted. Our Attorney General, then Miriam Ben-Parat, had a girl that was from the stolen Yemenite children. She was basically a vassal, all right? But neither here nor there. The rest died, but I didn't have the reason why. He wouldn't give it to me then. But he asked me to help in any way I could. I agreed. Now, this was one infiltrated movement. Deeply by Ashkenazi. It doesn't matter. I won't go through the whole story. It's long and ugly. Next phone call I got from his wife, she said he's been taken away. He's in Sharon prison. He wants to meet with you, and he'll tell you why they were kidnapped. Well, that was enough for me. I went to Sharon prison. Oh, talk about going down to the basement. Lower till we got to the basement. He was in a cage he had a radio. He blasted the radio and started talking to me. He said, I don't want them to hear. And he said, well, one of the Ashkenazi kids, the infiltrators, is in the cell. He said the whole thing is being watched. He said, first of all, you have to understand why the kidnappings took place. Nobody believes me, but your, let's call it, bad guy in your book, Who Murdered Yitzhak Rabin, was Shimon Peres, who, of course, became prime minister, he became president, honored. He said he was the Atomic Energy Commissioner of Israel during the 50s. At that time, they didn't know much about the effects of radiation. He offered to give them a whole people to test what massive doses of gamma rays, X-rays, through their brains would do to them in return for atomic secrets, in return for the bomb, essentially. I said, look, what David didn't understand is I went through stuff that I hope he never has to go through, but I went through it. And I accepted he was right. He said, will you be our spokesman? Our movement has been totally, completely infiltrated. We need someone we can trust. We believe you can trust you. And I said, yes. I said, whatever I can do, I will be your spokesman. It doesn't matter. The infiltration was so complete, I never had a chance. That's a big problem, by the way, in Israel, is any time somebody comes up with the truth, boy, the infiltration is just everywhere. Look, what happened is he came back from Sharon prison, an invalid. He never spoke another word publicly. It was over with. The Yemenite children were over with, except they came back. They sued all kinds of Israeli government officials. A month ago, I got it. Well, the note was, you were the one who kept the issue going. and is now coming to the fore. You can't lie like this. And the Israeli government did it twice. The second time was worse. I got a phone call from David Belhassan. He was the director of something called the Ringworm Children. 115,000 children. Every Sephardic child was taken from classroom. Ashkenazi kids who accidentally stood up were shut down. Back to your desk. Their heads were shaved and they were blasted with massive doses of gamma rays right through their brains. An entire generation of Sephardic children, 6,000 died and the rest suffered. Go watch the Ringworm Children. It's in English. Same thing David Belhassan said. How did you get through? We've got a worse crime even, but we've got the same bad guy. This Shimon Peres, the Atomic Energy Commission, offered the Americans a race to experiment on. And that's what the labor government, labor Zionists, when people don't understand Zionism is many, many layered, the labor are absolutely god-awful, crooked butchers and murderers. They blasted 150,000 Sephardic children in the early 50s, up to 57, they shaved their heads, told them they had ringworm and we're going to get it out of your scalps. They took marker pens, 5-6 spots. Blast, 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 blast. Every single one of them. It was a nightmare to be in Israel during the 50s. If you weren't a labor Zionist, you were a guinea pig. Now I go to Google and write in, Barry Chamish, and one word after that, poop. P-O-O-P, that's my pun on Pope. And there's a reason for that. Go to YouTube, Chamish poop, and listen to what... It's tragic. I never wanted this. I never sought it out. They came to me. I didn't go to them. I didn't want to know from this. I grew up in a labor Zionist household. My parents were labor Zionist followers. Unfortunately, it was the Sephardim who woke me up to something god-awful going on. Simply god-awful. Nobody was victimless. Nobody. You came to Israel on a so-called carpet, a magic carpet, brought you to Israel. Somehow all the Arab leaders agreed that Israel should be populated with their Jews. From Morocco to Iran, they were on planes where they were being used as guinea pigs. And their parents did know Hebrew. They couldn't object. They couldn't fight for themselves. Their children and grandchildren are right now. There, I said it. Folks, this is Barry Chamish. My books are at lulu.com. That's LULU.com. Write in Chamish, CHAMISH. Website, barrychamish.com. Next Tuesday will be Eric Phelps. Good night, all. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie, with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character, as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy, in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.